Have you ever heard whispers in the dark that made your skin crawl? Ever felt eyes watching you from the shadows of the trees? If you've ever found yourself alone in the pine barrens of New Jersey after sunset, you might understand that feeling all too well. Welcome to tonight's story, where we'll explore the truth behind one of America's most enduring legends. Make sure you're tucked in tight, because once we begin, you might find it hard to distinguish between the rustling of your blankets and something else entirely. Something with wings and eyes that pierce the darkness. But before we dive into the shadows of the Pine Barrens, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss our weekly journeys into America's most chilling legends. Leave a comment below with your own strange encounters in the woods. Now, let's begin our tale. The warm glow of the dashboard was the only light Pierce Coleman could see for miles as he drove down Route 539 deep in the heart of New Jersey's Pine Barrens. His GPS had lost signal 20 minutes ago, and the radio played nothing but static. Just him, his old Chevy pickup, and a million pine trees stretching into darkness. "Should have taken the main highway," he muttered to himself, tapping nervously on the steering wheel. Shortcut to nowhere. Pierce was a journalist from Philadelphia, heading to a small town called Leeds Point to interview locals about their encounters with the legendary Jersey Devil. It was meant to be a puff piece for Halloween. Nothing serious, just something to fill space in the lifestyle section. At least, that's what his editor had said. The road narrowed, and the asphalt gave way to gravel. His headlights caught something in the road ahead. A deer, perhaps. And Pierce slowed down. But when the light hit it directly, there was nothing there. "Just tired," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Just need some coffee and a decent motel." The Pine Barrens stretched for over 1,000,000 acres, making it one of the largest undeveloped areas on the eastern seaboard. A place where people could get lost and stay lost. Where cell phones became useless chunks of metal and glass. Where stories older than the nation itself still lingered in the air like morning mist. As Pierce rounded a bend, his headlights illuminated a small roadside diner, its neon open sign flickering weakly against the night. The parking lot was nearly empty, just 2 pickup trucks and a motorcycle. Pierce pulled in, relieved to find signs of civilization. The bell above the door jingled as he entered, and the few patrons, an elderly couple in one booth and a trucker at the counter, briefly looked up before returning to their meals. "Evening," said the waitress, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her name tag read Martha. "What can I get you, hon?" "Coffee, black," Pierce said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. "And directions, if you've got them. I'm trying to get to Leeds Point." Martha's hand paused as she reached for the coffee pot. "Leeds Point? At this hour? I've got an interview in the morning. I'm a journalist." Martha poured his coffee slowly, deliberately. "What kind of story brings you all the way out here?" "I'm doing a piece on the Jersey Devil." Pierce smiled, expecting the eye roll he usually got when he mentioned the assignment. But Martha didn't smile back. Neither did the trucker beside him, who had stopped eating his apple pie mid-bite. "Now, why would a city boy like you be poking around in old stories like that?" the trucker asked, setting down his fork. Pierce shrugged. "Halloween issue. People love to get scared from the safety of their living rooms." Martha placed the coffee in front of him. "Some stories aren't meant for entertainment, young man." "Oh, come on," Pierce chuckled. "You don't actually believe in the Jersey Devil, do you? A flying creature with the head of a horse, bat wings, and a forked tail?" The elderly man in the booth spoke up, his voice gravelly with age. "My grandfather saw it in 1909. During the week it terrorized the whole state. Saw it clear as day, standing on the roof of the barn. And my cousin Darlene," Martha added, leaning on the counter, She lost 3 goats last spring. Found them with their insides. Well, it wasn't coyotes or bears, I'll tell you that much. Pierce took a sip of his coffee, unsure if they were pulling his leg. So, you're saying it's real? I'm saying, Martha replied, that the Pine Barrens keep their secrets, and some things are better left alone. The trucker nodded. If you're set on going to Leeds Point, you'll want to stay on this road for another 15 miles, then take the fork to the right. But I wouldn't go there after dark if I were you. The Barrens play tricks, the elderly woman said softly, especially when the moon is waning. Pierce finished his coffee quickly, suddenly eager to be back on the road. These people were clearly enjoying spinning tales for the city journalist. He'd play along. Any advice for avoiding the devil? He asked with a small smile. Martha didn't return his smile. Don't whistle at night. It draws attention. Pierce paid for his coffee, leaving a generous tip, and headed back to his truck. As he started the engine, he noticed the diner's lights seemed dimmer now, the building itself somehow smaller against the vast darkness of the pines. He drove on, following the trucker's directions. The trees seemed to close in on the narrow road, branches reaching like fingers across the night sky. Every so often, he thought he saw movement in his peripheral vision, but when he turned to look, there was only darkness. About 10 miles down the road, Pierce's truck began to sputter. No, 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 he muttered, pumping the gas pedal. The engine coughed, then died completely. Perfect, just perfect. He coasted to the side of the road and tried the ignition again. Nothing. Pierce slammed his hand against the steering wheel in frustration and reached for his cell phone. No service, of course. With a sigh, he grabbed his flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out of the truck. The night air was cool and damp, heavy with the scent of pine. It was quiet, too quiet. No crickets, no distant traffic, just the soft susurration of wind through the trees. Pierce popped the hood and shined his flashlight on the engine, though he knew little about car mechanics. Nothing seemed obviously wrong. He was checking the battery connections when he heard it. A soft, strange sound, like the cry of an animal in pain, but not quite. He froze, flashlight beam trembling slightly. The sound came again, from somewhere deeper in the woods. A chill ran down his spine despite the mild night. "Hello?" he called out, immediately regretting it. "Anyone there?" Silence answered him. Pierce quickly closed the hood and retreated to the cab of his truck, locking the doors. He would wait until morning, or until another car passed by, whichever came first. He reclined his seat slightly and closed his eyes, trying to ignore the occasional sounds from the forest around him. Just animals, he told himself. Perfectly normal forest animals. Pierce must have dozed off because he awoke with a start to a sharp tapping on his window. He jerked upright, heart hammering in his chest. An old man stood outside holding a lantern. His face was deeply lined, eyes dark beneath bushy white eyebrows. He gestured for Pierce to roll down the window. After a moment's hesitation, Pierce lowered it a crack. "Who are you?" "Name's Henry Jenkins. Live just up the road. Saw your truck. Need a hand?" Pierce studied the man. Despite his initial alarm, Henry seemed harmless enough, just an elderly local out for a late-night walk. With a lantern, oddly enough, rather than a flashlight. "Car just died on me," Pierce explained. "I was heading to Leeds Point." "Leeds Point?" Henry's bushy eyebrows rose. "At this hour? Must be important business. I'm researching the Jersey Devil legend. I'm a journalist." Henry was quiet for a long moment. "Well, you won't get there tonight, but my place is just a quarter-mile up. You can use my phone, maybe call a tow in the morning." Pierce weighed his options. Spend the night in his truck in the middle of nowhere, or accept the old man's hospitality. Neither seemed ideal, but at least the latter offered a phone. "That's very kind of you," Pierce said finally, grabbing his backpack and jacket. They walked in silence down the dark road, Henry's lantern casting long shadows among the trees. The old man moved with surprising agility, seemingly unbothered by the uneven ground. "You lived here long?" Pierce asked, trying to make conversation. "All my life," Henry replied, "same as my father, and his father before him. So you must know all the local stories." Henry glanced at him. "Some stories aren't just stories, young man." Before Pierce could respond, they rounded a bend, and a small cabin came into view. It was rustic but well-maintained, with a front porch and smoking chimney. Warm light spilled from the windows. "Home sweet home," Henry said, leading him up the porch steps. Inside, the cabin was cozy and cluttered with books, dried herbs hanging from the ceiling beams, and odd collections of bones and feathers on the shelves. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, casting the room in a warm glow. "Phone's in the kitchen," Henry said, hanging his lantern on a hook by the door. "Help yourself." Pierce found the ancient rotary phone on the wall and dialed the number for roadside assistance. To his surprise, it worked perfectly. After arranging for a tow truck in the morning, he returned to the main room, where Henry was stoking the fire. "They'll come at first light," Pierce said. "I really appreciate this, Mr. Jenkins." "Henry, please." The old man gestured to an armchair. "Sit, warm yourself. You said you're here about the Leeds Devil?" "The Jersey Devil, yes." Pierce sat, grateful for the warmth of the fire. "I'm gathering local perspectives for an article." Henry chuckled. "Jersey Devil is what the out-of-towners call it. Around here, it's always been the Leeds Devil, named for the family, you see." "The Leeds family?" "I've read about them. The mother cursed her 13th child or something. That's the tale they tell." Henry nodded. "Mother Leeds, in labor with her 13th child, cursed it to be a devil. And when it was born, it transformed, grew hooves and wings and a tail, killed the midwife, flew up the chimney and disappeared into the barrens. But that's just a folk tale," Pierce said. "Probably started as a way to explain birth defects or to demonize an unpopular family." Henry's eyes reflected the firelight as he gazed at Pierce. "Is that what they teach you in the city? That our stories are just ignorance dressed up as fantasy? I didn't mean—" "The Leeds family was real," Henry continued. "Mother Leeds, her real name was Deborah. She wasn't just some random woman. She was knowledgeable in the old ways, what some might call a witch, though she never would have used that word." Pierce leaned forward. Journalist instincts peaked. "So, you're saying she really cursed her child?" "I'm saying," Henry replied carefully, "that Deborah Leeds knew things most folks had forgotten even back then. The Lenape people who lived in these woods for thousands of years before the Europeans came, they had their own tales of a creature in the barrens. They called it Mazing, the woodland spirit, keeper of the forest." "So it predates the Leeds family?" Henry nodded. "The barrens have always had their guardians. The Jersey Devil isn't evil, despite the name. It's a protector. It only becomes dangerous when people threaten the barrens themselves." Pierce found himself drawn into the old man's tale despite his skepticism. "And you believe this? It's not about belief." Henry stood and walked to one of his bookshelves, running his fingers along the spines. "It's about respect. The barrens are one of the last wild places in this part of the country. Over 1 million acres of pine forest, cedar swamps, and sandy soil. Home to plants and animals you won't find anywhere else." He selected a book and returned to his seat. "Did you know the water here is unlike anywhere else? Stained the color of tea from the cedar trees. Iron in the soil turns streams the color of rust. It's a special place. Sacred, even." Pierce nodded, though he wasn't sure where this was going. and the Jersey Devil protects it. The Leeds Devil, Henry corrected, is as much a part of the Barrens as the pines themselves. It's the spirit of this place given form. He opened the book, which appeared to be a journal, its pages yellowed with age. This was my grandfather's. He claimed to have encountered the creature in 1909 during what the newspapers called Devil Week. Thousands of people reported seeing it across New Jersey and even into Pennsylvania. Pierce tried to peer at the journal, but Henry closed it before he could see what was written. He described it just like all the others. Horse-like head, bat wings, long neck, cloven hooves, and eyes that seem to look right through you, know everything about you. A log shifted in the fireplace, sending up a shower of sparks. Outside, the wind had picked up, branches scratching against the cabin walls. So, why does it show itself sometimes and not others? Pierce asked. Henry's expression grew grave. It appears when the Barrens are threatened. In 1909, they were planning to drain large parts of the wetlands. In the 1960s, when developers wanted to build a jet port here. In the 70s, during talks of a nuclear power plant. And now? Now? Henry looked into the fire. There's talk of a new resort complex, thousands of acres, golf courses, hotels, shopping centers, right in the heart of the Barrens. Pierce felt a chill, despite the warmth of the fire. And you think that's why there have been new sightings? Henry didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "What brought you to this story, Mr. Coleman? What drew you to the Barrens?" Pierce was startled by the use of his last name, which he didn't recall sharing with Henry. It was just an assignment, Halloween content. Nothing more? No personal connection? Pierce hesitated. There was something. A memory he had almost forgotten. When I was a kid, my grandfather used to tell me stories about the Jersey Devil. He grew up in South Jersey, claimed his brother saw it once. Henry nodded as if this confirmed something. The devil calls to those who have a connection to this land, those whose ancestors knew it. The wind outside grew stronger, and somewhere in the distance a sound rose above it. A cry, not quite animal, not quite human. Pierce stood up suddenly. What was that? Henry didn't seem alarmed. Just the wind in the pines. They make strange sounds at night. But Pierce wasn't convinced. The cry came again, closer now, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. "I should check on my truck," he said, moving toward the door. Henry remained seated. "I wouldn't go out there now. Night's not safe in the Barrens." Pierce paused, hand on the doorknob. "Because of the Jersey Devil?" "Because it's dark and the roads are tricky," Henry replied calmly. "You should rest. Morning will be here soon enough." Against his better judgment, Pierce returned to his seat. "Tell me more about the Leeds family. What happened to them?" Henry seemed pleased by the question. They scattered, most of them. Changed their names to escape the notoriety, but some stayed, kept watch over the Barrens, kept the old knowledge alive. What kind of knowledge? How to live with the land, not against it. How to read the signs in nature, how to communicate with the spirits of a place. Pierce tried to keep his expression neutral, but his journalistic skepticism must have shown. Henry smiled faintly. "You don't believe, and that's your right, but belief doesn't change what's real." The cry came again, unmistakably closer, and this time it was followed by a thud on the roof of the cabin. Pierce jumped to his feet. "What was that?" "Sit down, Mr. Coleman." Henry's voice had changed, taking on an edge of authority that seemed at odds with his elderly appearance. "I think I should go," Pierce said, backing toward the door. "It's not safe out there right now." Thud, scrape. Something was moving across the roof. "What is that?" Pierce demanded, heart racing. Henry stood slowly. "You came looking for the Leeds Devil, didn't you?" Well, it seems it's found you instead. A shadow passed across the window, momentarily blocking the moonlight. Pierce grabbed his backpack. I'm leaving. The devil doesn't harm those who respect the barons, Henry said. Only those who threaten them. I'm not threatening anything, I'm just writing a story. Stories have power, Henry replied. They shape how people think, how they act. Your story could bring more curious people, more development, more destruction. The scratching sound moved to the side of the cabin, then to the front door. Pierce backed away from it, bumping into a bookshelf. What do you want from me? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. I want you to tell the true story, Henry said. Not some Halloween tale about a monster, but the truth about the barons and what they mean. About what we lose when we pave over the wild places, the sacred places. The scratching at the door stopped. In its place came a soft, almost gentle tapping, like someone politely requesting entry. Henry walked to the door and placed his hand on it. Will you tell that story, Mr. Coleman? Pierce couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Every instinct told him to run. But where? Into the dark barrens, where whatever was outside could easily find him. I'll tell the story, he managed finally. The true story. Henry studied him for a long moment, then nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good, that's good. He turned back to the door and to Pierce's horror began to open it. Wait, Pierce cried out. What are you doing? Introducing you, Henry said simply. You can't tell the true story if you haven't met its subject. The door swung open, revealing the dark pine forest beyond, and standing on the threshold, silhouetted against the night, was a figure that shouldn't exist. It stood upright on cloven hooves, taller than a man, leathery wings folded against its back. Its head was elongated, horse-like but wrong somehow, with antlers branching from its skull. And its eyes glowed with an inner light that seemed to pierce right through Pierce, seeing everything he was, everything he had ever been. Pierce couldn't move, couldn't scream. He could only stare as the creature regarded him with those ancient, knowing eyes. This is Mr. Coleman, Henry said to the creature, as casually as if introducing guests at a dinner party. He's going to tell your story, the true story. Then he turned to Pierce. And this is the guardian of the barons. Some call it the Jersey Devil. Others, the Leeds Devil. The Lenape knew it as Mezzing. But names don't matter much. What matters is understanding. The creature made no move to enter the cabin. It simply watched, its gaze unblinking. It's not going to hurt me? Pierce whispered. Not if you keep your promise, Henry replied. Not if you tell the truth. Slowly, Pierce reached into his backpack and withdrew his notebook and pen. With trembling hands, he began to write down everything he had seen and heard. The creature watched him for a time, then turned and walked back into the darkness of the barrens. Each step silent despite its hooves, its form gradually fading until Pierce couldn't tell if it had disappeared into the trees or simply ceased to be. Henry closed the door. Was that real? Pierce asked, his voice hoarse. As real as the barons themselves, Henry replied, as real as the danger they're in. Who are you, really? Pierce asked. You're not just some old man living in a cabin. Henry smiled, and in that smile, Pierce saw something ancient and wise and not entirely human. I'm a Leeds, he said simply, one of the few who kept the old name, one of the keepers. And the devil, family, Henry said, after a fashion. Pierce sat up most of the night, writing feverishly by firelight, occasionally asking Henry questions that the old man sometimes answered, sometimes deflected. When morning came, Pierce stepped outside to find his truck parked in front of the cabin, engine running smoothly when he turned the key. I thought it broke down, he said to Henry, who stood on the porch. "The barons give what's needed," the old man replied. "Will you keep your promise, Mr. Coleman?" Pierce looked down at his notebook, filled with the true story of the Jersey Devil, not a monster but a guardian, not a curse but a blessing, not a Halloween tale, but a warning about what happens when sacred places are threatened. "I'll tell the true story," he promised. As he drove away, Pierce checked his rearview mirror. Henry stood on the porch, watching him go. And for just a moment, Pierce thought he saw something else beside the old man. A tall, antlered figure, its wings unfurled against the morning sky. But when he blinked, there was only Henry, raising his hand in farewell. "Back to you." So now you know the truth behind the Jersey Devil. Not a demon or a monster, but a protector of one of America's last wild places. The next time you hear strange sounds in the forest, or feel eyes watching you from the shadows, remember, it might not be something evil. It might be something ancient, something that was here long before us, and will remain long after. The Jersey Devil still haunts the Pine Barrens, not because it's cursed, but because it's bound to the land it loves, just as we all are if we only knew it. Sleep tight tonight, and perhaps dream of wild places where mysteries still live. And if you enjoyed this journey into American folklore, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your own strange encounters in the comments below. What creatures guard the wild places near your home? Until next time, remember, sometimes the monsters in our stories aren't monsters at all. Sometimes they're the heroes we've forgotten how to recognize. Story number 2. Ever had that feeling of being watched in your own home? That prickle on the back of your neck that tells you something's not right? I never believed in those stories, until it happened to me. My name is Alex Walker, and the bizarre events I'm about to share have haunted me for months. I've debated whether to tell anyone, but I need answers. If you've experienced anything similar, please share in the comments. And if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, you might want to, because the strangest part, these occurrences are becoming more frequent, and I don't know how this ends. The story begins now. The house on Maple Street was everything I dreamed of. A charming craftsman with a wraparound porch in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Portland, Oregon. After living in cramped apartments in the city for years, the space felt luxurious. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a finished basement, and a backyard with tall pine trees that whispered in the wind. The real estate listing described it as a character home with history, and at a price I could actually afford, it seemed too good to be true. Maybe it was. The previous owners, an elderly couple, had moved to Florida to be closer to their grandchildren. At least, that's what my realtor told me. The house had been on the market for nearly a year, which seemed odd given the hot housing market, but I didn't question my good fortune. Sometimes these older homes take a while to find the right owner, my realtor, Diane, had said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. They can be particular. I laughed it off at the time. Now, I wonder if she knew something I didn't. The first night in my new home was exactly what you'd expect. Boxes everywhere. Takeout pizza on a folding table. An air mattress that slowly deflated as I slept. Nothing unusual, except for the dream. I dreamed of walking through my house, except it wasn't quite my house. The layout was the same, but the walls were covered in old-fashioned floral wallpaper I'd never seen before. And there was someone else there. A figure at the end of the hallway, watching me. I couldn't see their face, just a silhouette, but I knew they were smiling. Not in a friendly way. In my dream, I called out, "Hello," but no sound came from my mouth. The figure raised a finger to where their lips would be, "Shh," and then stepped backward, disappearing into the wall. I woke with a start at exactly 3:17 a.m., heart pounding. Just a dream, I told myself. Just a dream brought on by sleeping in a new place. The next day was consumed with unpacking. I'm methodical about these things. Kitchen first, then bathroom, bedroom, living room. By evening, the house was beginning to look lived in. I ordered Chinese food, poured myself a glass of wine, and settled onto my couch to watch Netflix. That's when I heard it for the first time. A soft tapping sound, tap, 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 coming from somewhere inside the walls. Old houses make noise, I reminded myself. They settle, they creak. It's normal. I turned up the volume on my show and tried to ignore it. But the tapping continued, maintaining the same steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. After 15 minutes, I paused my show and stood up. "Hello?" I called out, feeling foolish. The tapping stopped immediately. Maybe it was a branch against the side of the house, or a loose shutter. I walked through each room, checking windows and doors, but found nothing amiss. When I returned to the living room, the tapping had stopped. I finished my wine, watched another episode, and headed to bed, chalking it up to normal house noises. That night, I dreamed of the figure again. This time, they were in my bedroom, standing in the corner, watching me sleep. Again, I couldn't see their face, just a dark silhouette against the darker wall. I tried to scream, but couldn't make a sound. The figure slowly raised its hand and pointed at something behind me. I wanted to look, but I couldn't move, couldn't turn my head. I woke at 3:17 a.m. again, drenched in sweat. My bedroom was empty, of course. Just normal shadows cast by the streetlight filtering through my curtains. I got up, splashed cold water on my face, and went back to bed, leaving the bathroom light on like a child afraid of the dark. The next morning, I found a small puddle of water on my kitchen floor. At first, I thought it had leaked from under the sink, but the pipes were dry. It was just there, in the middle of the floor. I mopped it up and went to work, pushing the odd occurrence out of my mind. That evening, the tapping returned, but this time it seemed to be coming from the ceiling, right above my head as I sat on the couch. Tap, 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 the same steady rhythm. "It's just the house settling," I said aloud, as if hearing my own voice would make it true. But houses don't settle in perfect, rhythmic patterns. I turned off the TV and listened. Tap, tap, tap. Always 3 taps, then a pause, then 3 more. Almost like Morse code, or like someone trying to get my attention. "Is someone there?" I called out, immediately feeling ridiculous. The tapping stopped. I waited, barely breathing. Then, from the basement, tap, tap, tap. A chill ran down my spine. Was someone in my house? I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911, and crept toward the basement door. With trembling fingers, I flipped on the light switch and peered down the stairs. Nothing. Just my washer and dryer, some storage boxes, and the old workbench the previous owners had left behind. I took a deep breath and descended the stairs slowly, phone clutched tightly in my hand. The basement was cool and smelled faintly of laundry detergent and old wood. I checked behind the boxes, in the small bathroom, even inside the ancient chest freezer that I'd yet to plug in. Nothing. No one. As I turned to head back upstairs, I noticed something on the workbench that I hadn't seen before. A small, antique-looking key. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. It was heavy for its size, made of brass with an ornate head. It didn't look like any key that would fit a modern lock. "Where did you come from?" I murmured, pocketing the key. I'd figure it out later. That night, I dreamed of the figure again. This time, they were holding the key I'd found, twirling it between fingers I couldn't quite see. They held it out to me, as if offering it back. I reached for it, and as my fingers brushed against theirs, I felt a jolt of ice-cold energy shoot up my arm. The figure leaned forward, and though I still couldn't see their face, I heard them clearly. "You don't belong here." I woke at 3:17 a.m., gasping for breath. The key was clutched in my hand, though I was certain I'd left it on my bedside table before falling asleep. And it was freezing cold, as if it had been left outside in winter. The next day was Saturday, and I decided to learn more about my house. I drove to the local library and asked if they had any historical records or newspaper archives that might mention my address. The librarian, a kind-faced woman named Margaret with silver-streaked hair and cat-eye glasses, seemed unusually interested in my request. 429 Maple Street? The old Blackwood place? She peered at me over her glasses. What made you buy that house, if you don't mind my asking? I was taken aback. I liked it. It has character. Why? Is there something I should know? Margaret hesitated and then smiled tightly. Oh no, it's a lovely old house. Just been through several owners in recent years. People don't tend to stay long. A knot formed in my stomach. Do you know why? She shrugged. People move for all sorts of reasons. Then she led me to a microfilm reader and showed me how to access the local newspaper archives. Start with 1957. That's when the house was built. I spent hours scrolling through old newspapers, finding occasional mentions of the house or its residents. Nothing seemed unusual until I reached 1978. A small article caught my eye. Local man missing, police baffled. The article described how Thomas Blackwood, 42, had seemingly vanished from his home at 429 Maple Street. No signs of foul play, no indication he'd planned to leave. He simply disappeared. His wife reported last seeing him entering the basement to fix a leaky pipe. When she went to call him for dinner an hour later, he was gone. The basement door was locked from the inside. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the final line. Mrs. Blackwood reported hearing tapping noises from the basement walls for several days before her husband's disappearance. I printed the article and continued searching, finding a follow-up piece 3 months later. The case remained unsolved. Mrs. Blackwood had moved away. The house stood empty for 2 years before new owners moved in. And those owners? They sold after just 8 months, as did the next family, and the next. No one stayed in my house for more than a year, until the elderly couple who sold to me. They had lived there for nearly 2 decades. They were the anomaly. What made them different? What did they know that I didn't? As I was about to leave, Margaret approached my table. "Find anything interesting?" she asked, her eyes flickering to the printed articles. "Actually, yes. Did you know about Thomas Blackwood disappearing?" She nodded slowly. I was a girl when it happened. It was quite the scandal. Some people thought his wife did something to him, but nothing was ever proven. "And what do you think happened?" Margaret glanced around, then lowered her voice. "My grandmother used to say that house was built wrong, that the builder cut corners, didn't respect the land. She said the house takes people sometimes. Sounds crazy, I know. Takes people? What does that mean? Just old superstitions." She straightened up. "But if I were you, I'd be careful in that basement. And if you hear tapping, don't answer it." I drove home with a heavy feeling in my chest. The rational part of my brain said this was nonsense. Houses don't take people. But another part, a more primal part, whispered that something wasn't right about my dream. The tapping, the key, the puddle of water. All coincidences, sure, but how many coincidences does it take before it becomes a pattern? When I got home, I went straight to the basement, the newspaper articles clutched in my hand. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, looking around with new eyes. What had happened to Thomas Blackwood? Had he somehow been trapped in here? Had he died in this room? The key. I suddenly remembered the key I'd found on the workbench. I pulled it from my pocket and examined it again. It looked old enough to date back to the 1970s, maybe even older. I began searching the basement walls, looking for a keyhole, a hidden door, anything that might explain what happened to Thomas. After an hour of tapping on paneling and measuring for discrepancies in the room dimensions, I found nothing. Frustrated, I sat on the bottom step, turning the key over in my hands. "What are you for?" I muttered. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. The sound was coming from directly behind me, from the wall beside the stairs. Tap, tap, tap. Slowly, I stood and approached the wall. It was covered in the same wood paneling as the rest of the basement, nothing to distinguish it. I pressed my ear against it. Tap, tap, tap. It was definitely coming from inside the wall or behind it. I knocked on the paneling. It sounded hollow. Heart racing, I began pressing against different sections of the wall, looking for a latch or a loose panel. Near the bottom, one section moved slightly under my hand. I pushed harder, and with a soft click, a small door swung open, a door disguised to match the paneling perfectly. Behind it was a keyhole. My hands trembling, I inserted the brass key. It fit perfectly. I hesitated for a moment. Did I really want to know what was behind this hidden door? But curiosity overcame fear, and I turned the key. The lock mechanism was stiff from disuse, but with a firm twist, it gave way. I pulled the small door open wider, revealing a dark space beyond. The smell that wafted out was musty and stale, like air that hadn't circulated in decades. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam illuminated a narrow crawlspace between the walls, a space just large enough for a person to squeeze through, and there, scratched into the inside of the door, were dozens of tally marks, as if someone had been keeping track of days, or trying to get out. "Hello?" I called into the darkness, my voice wavering. "Is anyone in there?" Silence answered me. I shone my light further into the crawlspace. It seemed to extend along the entire wall, turning a corner at the far end. Someone could easily get lost in there, or worse, trapped if the door closed behind them. Was this what happened to Thomas Blackwood? Had he discovered this space, crawled in to investigate, and somehow gotten trapped? The thought made my skin crawl. I was about to close the door. This was definitely something for the police to investigate, when I heard it again. Tap, 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 but this time, it was coming from around that corner, deeper in the crawlspace. Every instinct told me to slam the door shut, lock it, and call the police. But what if someone was trapped in there? What if they needed help? I took a deep breath and, against my better judgment, began to squeeze into the crawlspace. The passage was tight, the ceiling so low I had to crouch uncomfortably. Cobwebs clung to my hair and face as I inched forward, my phone's flashlight barely penetrating the thick darkness ahead. The wood creaked beneath my weight, and I wondered how old these hidden passages were. Had they been built with the house, or added later? And for what purpose? As I neared the corner, the tapping grew louder. Tap, 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 regular as a heartbeat. I paused, listening. It seemed to be coming from just around the bend. "Hello?" I called again. "Is someone there? Do you need help?" The tapping stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise had been. I steeled myself and peered around the corner. My flashlight beam played over rough wooden walls, more cobwebs, and a small, makeshift living space. There was a moldy blanket spread on the floor, a few empty tin cans, and scratched into every surface more tally marks. Hundreds of them. And crude drawings. A sun, a tree, a house. The desperate artwork of someone trying to remember what the outside world looked like. Someone had lived here, or been imprisoned here. But that wasn't the most disturbing thing. In the center of the blanket was a fresh water bottle, the kind you'd buy at any convenience store today. And beside it, half-eaten, was a sandwich that couldn't be more than a few hours old. Someone had been here. Recently. Maybe they still were. I backed away, suddenly aware of how vulnerable I was, trapped in a narrow space where I could barely stand, let alone run. I needed to get out, to call the police. As I turned to retreat, my flashlight caught something else. A small pile of personal effects in the corner. A wallet, a watch, a set of keys, modern keys, for a car and house, and a photo, a smiling family. mother, father, young daughter, standing in front of a house. My house. With shaking hands, I picked up the wallet and opened it. The driver's license inside showed a man in his 30s, brown hair, friendly eyes. Matthew Collins, the previous owner, the man who supposedly moved to Florida with his wife. But his wallet was here, in this hidden room, along with his watch and keys. I dropped the wallet as if it had burned me. Something was very wrong. Had Matthew Collins discovered this room like Thomas Blackwood before him? Had he met the same fate? And where was his wife? A sudden noise behind me made me whirl around, heart pounding. A soft scraping sound like something or someone moving along the passage toward me. I didn't wait to see what it was. I scrambled back the way I'd come, ducking cobwebs and ignoring the splinters that dug into my palms as I half crawled, half ran through the narrow space. I could see the open door ahead, the normal basement beyond it. I was almost there when my flashlight caught a glimpse of something moving in the darkness behind me. A shadow without a source, darker than the surrounding blackness. With a final desperate lunge, I threw myself through the doorway and slammed the hidden door shut, turning the key in the lock with trembling fingers. I backed away, breathing hard, watching the door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. But nothing happened. No knocking, no tapping, just silence. I stumbled up the basement stairs, locked that door too, and called the police. They arrived 20 minutes later. A bored-looking officer named Jenkins and his younger partner, Rodriguez. I led them to the basement and showed them the hidden door, explaining what I'd found inside and showing them the newspaper articles about Thomas Blackwood. Officer Jenkins seemed skeptical, but Rodriguez looked genuinely concerned. They drew their weapons before unlocking and opening the hidden door. "Stay here, ma'am," Jenkins instructed, as they shone their flashlights into the crawlspace. I waited anxiously as they disappeared into the passage. 5 minutes later, they emerged, holstering their weapons. "There's a room in there, all right," Jenkins said, brushing cobwebs from his uniform. "Old blanket, some cans. Looks like someone might have used it as a hideout years ago. Maybe a runaway kid or a homeless person who found a way in. But what about the fresh food?" I asked. "And the wallet? Matthew Collins' wallet?" The officers exchanged glances. "There was no food in there, ma'am," Rodriguez said gently, "and no wallet, just some old trash." "That's impossible," I insisted. "I saw it. It was right there on the blanket." "We searched thoroughly," Jenkins said, his tone making it clear he thought I was either lying or hallucinating. "There's nothing in there that's less than 20 years old, from the looks of it." They took my statement, promised to look into the previous owners, and left. I could tell they didn't believe me, and honestly, I was beginning to doubt myself. Had I imagined the water bottle, the sandwich, the wallet with Matthew Collins's ID? That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep in the house. I packed an overnight bag and checked into a motel, where I spent hours researching the history of my house and the Blackwood disappearance. I found little beyond what I already knew, but one forum post caught my attention. A discussion about liminal spaces in old houses, places that existed between the normal boundaries of a home. The post suggested that in some cases, these spaces could become thin points, where something else could cross over. "The walls between worlds aren't always as solid as we think," the post read. "Sometimes they wear thin, especially in places built wrong or where great trauma has occurred. And sometimes what comes through those thin spots looks almost human." Almost. I closed my laptop, disturbed by how closely this echoed what Margaret at the library had said about my house being built wrong. When I returned home the next day, the first thing I noticed was a puddle of water in the middle of my kitchen floor. Just like before, only larger. And beside it, a set of wet footprints leading toward the basement door. I stood frozen, staring at those footprints. They were small, like a woman's or a teenager's, and they led directly to the basement door, which was now ajar, though I was certain I'd locked it when I left. Someone was in my house. I should have left immediately, called the police from my car. That would have been the smart thing to do, but something compelled me forward, following those wet footprints to the basement door. I pushed it open wider, peering down the stairs. "Hello?" I called. "Is someone down there?" Tap, tap, tap. The response came immediately, from behind the hidden door in the wall. My hand trembled as I reached for the light switch. The basement illuminated, looking exactly as it had when I left, except for the trail of wet footprints leading to the hidden door, which stood slightly open. I had locked that door. I knew I had. I descended the stairs slowly, my phone in hand, 911 pre-dialed and ready to call with one touch. As I reached the bottom, the tapping came again, more insistent now. Tap, 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 tap. Someone, or something, wanted me to open that door. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt. "What do you want?" The tapping stopped. Then, faintly, I heard a voice. A woman's voice, hollow and distant, as if speaking through water. "Help me." A chill ran down my spine. It could be a trap. It could be anything waiting behind that door. But that voice, it sounded so desperate, so human. I approached the hidden door, still ajar, and pushed it open wider. The dark passage beyond seemed to swallow the light from the basement. "Hello?" I called into the darkness. "Who's in there?" "Help me." The voice came again, weaker this time. "Please." I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight again, shining it into the crawlspace. The beam caught something moving at the far end, where the passage turned. A pale hand reaching around the corner, beckoning. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't leave someone trapped in there. What if it was Mrs. Collins? What if she'd been in there all this time, somehow surviving while her husband... I didn't finish the thought. Instead, I took a deep breath and entered the crawlspace again. The passage seemed narrower than before, the ceiling lower. I had to crouch even more uncomfortably as I made my way towards that beckoning hand, my flashlight beam bouncing off the rough wooden walls. "I'm coming," I called. "Hold on." As I neared the corner, the hand withdrew. I hesitated, then peered around the bend. The space beyond was empty, no sign of whoever had been calling for help. But the blanket was there, just as I'd seen before, and on it, the water bottle and half-eaten sandwich, and the wallet. Everything exactly as I'd described to the police. Everything they'd claimed wasn't there. I picked up the wallet with trembling fingers and opened it again. Matthew Collins smiled up at me from his driver's license, blissfully unaware of whatever fate had befallen him in this house. A soft sound behind me made me turn, a footstep, the gentle creak of wood under weight. Someone was blocking the way I'd come in, a silhouette against the distant light of the basement. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't respond. It just stood there, watching me. I raised my flashlight, trying to see its face, but the beam seemed to pass right through it, illuminating nothing. And then it spoke, in a voice that wasn't quite human. A voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You don't belong here." The same words from my dream. "What do you want?" I asked, backing away as the figure took a step toward me. "What everyone wants," it said, its voice now sounding almost wistful. "A home, a life, a body." "A body," I repeated, not understanding. The figure took another step forward, and this time, my flashlight caught its features, or lack thereof. Where a face should have been was just emptiness, a void, a hungry darkness. "Yours will do nicely," it said. "Young, healthy, so much life left to live." Understanding dawned, horrible and cold. The missing people, Thomas Blackwood, possibly Matthew Collins, they hadn't just disappeared. They'd been replaced. "You're not human," I whispered. "Not anymore," it agreed. "But I remember being human. I remember the sun. I want to feel it again. It lunged forward suddenly, inhumanly fast, reaching for me with hands that seemed to flicker between solid and transparent. I scrambled backward, deeper into the crawlspace away from the exit. A mistake, I realized too late. I was trapping myself. The thing that wasn't human anymore followed, unhurried now, knowing I had nowhere to go. "Don't fight it," it said, almost gently. "The others did, and it only made it worse. It can be peaceful, like falling asleep, and then you'll be here, in the walls, in the spaces between. And I'll be out there, living your life. No one will know the difference." "The others," I gasped. "They're still here, in the walls?" It nodded, a grotesque movement of its featureless head. "Where else would they go? The house keeps us, all of us, forever." Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from all around me now, from within the walls themselves. Not just one person tapping, but many, all trying to communicate, to warn, to be heard. I was backed against the far wall now, nowhere left to retreat. The thing approached, its outline blurring and shifting as if it couldn't quite maintain a solid form. "Who are you?" I asked, playing for time, desperately trying to think of a way out. "Were you the first? The builder Margaret mentioned?" It paused, tilting its head. "Margaret? From the library? She's still alive?" A flicker of something almost human crossed its featureless face. Recognition, surprise. "You knew her?" I asked. "She was my granddaughter," it said softly, before the house took me. And in that moment of distraction I saw my chance. The thing was blocking the passage back to the door, but there was another way. The corner of the crawlspace had rotted, revealing a gap in the wall, a gap that might, just might, lead to another part of the basement. Without hesitation, I threw myself at the rotted wood, crashing through it with the force of pure desperation. Splinters tore at my skin as I tumbled through, landing hard on a concrete floor beyond. I was in another part of the basement, a storage area I hadn't explored yet, filled with old furniture covered in dust cloths. Behind me, the thing howled in rage, its voice no longer even attempting to sound human. I scrambled to my feet and ran, weaving between covered armchairs and tables, heading for a door I could see at the far end. Behind me, I heard the thing crashing through the rotted wall, giving chase. I reached the door and yanked it open, finding myself back in the main part of the basement, near the stairs. Freedom was just steps away. But as I raced for the stairs, the basement door at the top slammed shut. The lock clicked. I was trapped. Frantically, I looked around for another way out. There was a small window high on the wall, too small for an adult to fit through normally, but terror gives you strength you never knew you had. Behind me, the thing emerged from the storage room, its form shifting and contorting in ways that hurt my eyes to look at. It was losing whatever humanoid shape it had been maintaining, becoming something else entirely. "You can't escape," it hissed, its voice now a chorus of many voices layered together. "No one escapes the house." I grabbed a folding chair, smashed the window, and began pulling myself up and through, heedless of the glass cutting into my palms. The opening was painfully tight, but with a final desperate push, I squeezed through, tumbling onto the lawn outside. I didn't look back. I ran to my car, fumbled with the keys, and drove away, tires squealing on the pavement. I never returned to the house on Maple Street. I left everything behind. My furniture, my clothes, all my possessions. None of it was worth my life. Myself. The police didn't believe my story, of course. They investigated the house and found no hidden passages, no crawlspaces between the walls, no evidence of Matthew and Ellen Collins having met with foul play. According to records, they were indeed living happily in Florida. But I know what I saw. I know what almost happened to me. The house on Maple Street is on the market again, listed at a surprisingly affordable price. The real estate description calls it a character home with history. Perfect for a young family, it says. Plenty of space to grow. Sometimes I drive by just to make sure it's still standing, that it hasn't claimed anyone else. And sometimes, when I look at the upstairs window, I see a figure watching me. A silhouette against the glass. A shape without features. And I wonder who it's wearing now. Whose life it's living. And at night, in my new apartment across town, I sometimes wake at exactly 3:17 a.m., thinking I hear a familiar sound. Tap, tap, tap. So if you're watching this and you've been experiencing anything similar, unexplained noises, dreams of faceless figures, small puddles of water appearing without source, know that you're not alone. I believe you. And I urge you to do what I didn't, leave. Leave before the house decides it wants you, because the walls between worlds are thin in some places, and what lives in the spaces between is hungry. If you've made it this far, please share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever felt like your home was watching you? Have you encountered spaces that felt wrong somehow? Subscribe to this channel for more true encounters with the unexplained, and remember to check back. I'll be sharing updates on the house on Maple Street and what I've learned about its history since my escape. Stay safe. And if you hear tapping from your walls tonight, don't answer it. Story number 3. Hey there, fellow night owls. Before we begin tonight's story, I want to thank you for joining me again on this channel. If you've been enjoying these tales that keep you company during those sleepless nights, consider hitting that subscribe button. And if tonight's story sends a particular chill down your spine, well, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Now, get comfortable, perhaps not too comfortable, as we explore a phenomenon that has haunted small towns across America for decades. The story you're about to hear is fictional, but the fear it may instill, that might linger long after you've closed your eyes. The story begins now. I never used to keep my porch light on at night. It wastes electricity, and in our small Oregon town of Pine Ridge, nestled between endless forests and misty mountains, there wasn't much need for it. Until 3 weeks ago. Now, I keep every light in my house blazing until dawn, because darkness invites them. My name is Megan Wheeler, and I work from home as a freelance graphic designer in a modest 2-bedroom house at the end of Oakwood Drive. Most of my neighbors are retirees who are in bed by 9, which suited my night owl tendencies just fine. I cherished the peaceful solitude of those quiet hours. 3 dots? It was a Tuesday evening in late October when the first strange thing happened. I was at my desk finishing a project for a client in Seattle, my second cup of chamomile tea growing cold beside my keyboard. Outside, a storm was brewing. The wind whispered through the trees and occasional raindrops tapped against my window like impatient fingers. I remember thinking how cozy it felt to be inside while nature raged beyond my walls. At precisely 11:17 p.m., I remember checking my computer clock. There was a knock at my front door. 3 rapid taps, followed by 2 slower ones. Tap, 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 tap. I froze, my hands hovering over my keyboard. In 3 years of living here, no one had ever knocked on my door after 8 p.m. Ever. Probably just Mrs. Abernathy from next door, I murmured to myself, though something in my gut tightened with uncertainty. Maybe her cat got out again. I stood up and padded across the hardwood floors to the entryway. Through force of habit, I reached for the doorknob without checking the peephole. But something stopped me. A coldness that wasn't from the autumn air seemed to seep through the door, wrapping icy fingers around my wrist. I pulled my hand back and instead leaned toward the peephole. The porch light was off. I'd forgotten to turn it on again, but in the dim spillover from my living room windows, I could make out a small figure standing perfectly still. A child, it seemed. A boy of maybe 12 years old, wearing a dark hoodie pulled up over his head. "Hello?" I called through the door. "Can I help you?" The child didn't move. Didn't shift from foot to foot like kids normally do. didn't look around. Just stood there, face tilted slightly downward, hands hidden in the front pocket of his hoodie. "It's pretty late, honey. Are you okay? Do you need me to call someone?" My voice sounded hollow in the quiet entryway, and something about the stillness of the child made the hair on my arms stand up. Finally, a response came. A voice too measured, too articulate for a child that age. "May I come in, please? I need to use your phone." The words were polite, even innocent, but delivered in a flat, emotionless tone that sent a chill racing up my spine. "I'm sorry, but it's very late. Where are your parents? I'd be happy to call them for you." 3 dots. The child raised his head then, but the hood cast shadows where his eyes should be. "Please, I'm lost. I need to call my mom. May I please come in?" Each word was carefully enunciated, like someone reading from a script they didn't quite understand. "What's your mom's number? I can call her right now." I reached for my cell phone in my pocket, relieved to have a barrier between me and that door. A long silence followed, during which I swear the temperature in my entryway dropped 10 degrees. When the child spoke again, his voice had changed subtly, deeper, older somehow. "I need to come in. Please let me in." My thumb was already dialing 911, though I wasn't sure what I'd say. "Hello, officer. There's a lost child at my door, but something feels wrong?" They'd think I was crazy. I looked through the peephole again, and my blood turned to ice. The child had moved closer to the door, impossibly closer, as I hadn't heard a single footstep on my creaky porch boards. And he had tilted his face up directly toward the peephole, as if he knew exactly where I was looking from. I could see his face clearly now, pale, almost translucent skin, no expression whatsoever. And his eyes, where there should have been whites and irises and pupils, there were only bottomless pools of solid black, like holes cut into the universe itself. No light reflected from them. They absorbed everything, gave nothing back. I stumbled backward, nearly dropping my phone. My back hit the wall behind me as my mind raced to make sense of what I was seeing. It had to be contacts, right? Some kid playing a Halloween prank? But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. There was something profoundly wrong about those eyes. Something ancient and hungry and patient. "Please let me in," came the voice again, no longer even attempting to sound childlike. "I've been traveling. I'm so tired, I just need to come in for a little while." My finger hovered over the call button on my phone. But before I could press it, another voice joined the first one. Higher pitched, a little girl's voice. "We won't hurt you. We just need to use your phone. Don't you want to help us?" I hadn't seen a second child through the peephole. Forcing myself to look again, I saw that the boy had been joined by a smaller figure, a girl no older than 8, with long straight hair and the same dark, all-consuming eyes. They stood side by side, 2 perfect statues on my porch, staring at my door as if they could see through it, as if they could see me. "Go away," I finally managed to say, my voice breaking. "Please just go away, or I'm calling the police." The girl tilted her head at an unnatural angle. "You won't call anyone. You'll let us in. It's cold out here." It was then that I noticed something else strange. Despite the rain that had been starting when I sat down to work, neither child was wet. Not a drop on their clothing. Not a strand of hair out of place. 1 dot. I took out my phone, finally hitting the call button. As it rang, I heard the knocking begin again. Tap, 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 tap. 911, what's your emergency? I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. How could I explain this? "Hello, this is 911. Do you have an emergency? There are children," I finally whispered. "At my door, something's wrong with them. Their eyes are completely black, and they won't leave." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ma'am, are the children in distress?" "No, they're just standing there." But something's not right. I live at the end of Oakwood Drive, 1487. Please send someone." "All right, ma'am. I'm dispatching an officer to your location now. Should take about 15 minutes." I nodded, then realized the dispatcher couldn't see me. Yes, I will." And I tried. I really did. But when the knocking started again, this time a slow, deliberate rhythm that seemed to sync with my heartbeat, I found myself drawn back to the peephole. All three of them were pressed against my door now, faces upturned, black eyes fixed on the peephole. Their expressions remained blank, but there was something like hunger in their postures. The teenager spoke this time, his voice cracking in a way that might have been typical for his age, if it hadn't been underlaid with something that sounded ancient. "We can see you watching us. Why won't you help us? Don't you want to be a good person? Please, just open the door." My hand twitched toward the deadbolt and I yanked it back as if burned. What was I doing? Part of me, some deep, primal part, had almost opened the door, had almost invited them in. I backed away, clutching my phone like a lifeline. "Stay away from me," I called out, voice trembling. "The police are coming." "Why would you call the police on children?" the girl asked, her voice sweet but hollow. "We just need help. Don't you want to help us?" 3 dots. In the distance, I heard the blessed sound of a siren. Relief flooded through me, my knees nearly buckling. The police were coming. Everything would be okay. I looked through the peephole one last time. The porch was empty. They were gone. When Officer Davis arrived, I was sitting on my couch, every light in the house blazing, a kitchen knife clutched in one hand. I must have looked half crazy, but he took my statement seriously, jotting notes as I described the 3 black-eyed children. "And you say they just vanished when they heard the sirens?" he asked. I nodded. Yes, they were there 1 second, gone the next. He walked around the perimeter of my house, checking for footprints or any sign that someone had been there. He found nothing. The porch was dry, despite the rain, and the flower beds surrounding it were undisturbed. "Miss Wheeler, are you familiar with an urban legend called the Black-Eyed Kids? Becks for short?" I shook my head. "It's something that started circulating online back in the late 90s. Stories about children with solid black eyes who show up at people's doors or cars asking to be let in. They always say they need to use a phone or that they're lost." He closed his notebook. "It's become a pretty popular campfire story over the years." My chest tightened. "You think I made this up?" "No, ma'am. I think you saw something that frightened you. Could have been local kids playing a prank. Those black sclera contacts are easy to get online these days, especially around Halloween." He was humoring me. I could see it in his eyes, gentle concern mixed with professional skepticism. "Officer Davis, I know what I saw. They weren't normal. The way they spoke, the way they stood so still, and they knew my name. The 911 operator called me Miss Wheeler, but I never told her my name." This caught his attention. "The children called you by name?" "No," I admitted. "But the dispatcher did. I never gave it to her." He flipped back through his notes. "Says here you identified yourself when you called. First thing you said." Had I? I couldn't remember doing that. But then again, I had been terrified, not thinking clearly. Maybe I had. "Look," Officer Davis said kindly. "I'll drive around the neighborhood, see if I spot any kids out past curfew. And I'll swing by your place a couple extra times tonight during my patrol. But I really think this was just some local teens having a bit of Halloween fun at your expense." After he left, I double-checked every lock in the house and drew all the curtains. I tried to convince myself that he was right, just kids playing a prank, taking advantage of a well-known urban legend to scare the woman who lived alone at the end of the street. But deep down, I knew better. 1 dot. I spent the next day researching black-eyed children. Dozens of accounts spanning decades described almost exactly what I had experienced. Children appearing late at night, asking to be let in. displaying unnaturally black eyes and strange, adult-like speech patterns. Most stories ended the same way. The person refused to let them in, and the children eventually left. But a few described what happened when someone did let them in. Those stories ended abruptly, or with vague references to tragedy, illness, or disappearance. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I was allowing an internet urban legend to feed my imagination, that Officer Davis was right, just local kids with Halloween contacts pulling a prank. But I still bought new deadbolts for every exterior door and motion-activated floodlights for the yard. 3 days passed without incident. The memory began to fade, becoming more dream than reality. I started sleeping better, working later, regaining my normal routine. Then came Friday night. 3 dots. I was in the kitchen making a late dinner when my cell phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered, cradling the phone between my ear and shoulder as I stirred pasta sauce. Silence on the other end. Then, faintly, what sounded like children whispering to each other, too quiet for me to make out the words. "Hello, who is this?" I asked, lowering the heat on the stove. "Megan." Not a question, a statement, a child's voice, but with an adult's cadence. "Why won't you let us in, Megan? Everyone needs help sometimes." The wooden spoon clattered to the floor. I hadn't told them my first name, I was certain of that. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice rising. "This isn't funny." "We're still waiting, Megan. We're patient. We can wait as long as it takes." I hung up, hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Immediately it rang again, same unknown number. I declined the call. It rang again, and again, and again. On the 6th call, I turned off my phone entirely and unplugged the landline I rarely used. The sudden silence in the house was almost worse than the ringing. I found myself straining to hear any sound from outside. Footsteps on the porch, breathing at the windows. The soft tap-tap-tap that had haunted my dreams for days. Nothing came. Just the normal creaks and groans of an older house settling for the night. I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room, lights on, a baseball bat across my lap, waiting for morning. When dawn finally broke, I felt foolish, sleep-deprived and paranoid, jumping at shadows. I made coffee, strong and black, and took it out to my back deck. The morning was crisp and clear, the grass silvery with dew, birds chattering in the pine trees that bordered my property. In the daylight, my fears seemed childish. As I sipped my coffee, Mrs. Abernathy called over the fence from her yard. A sweet woman in her 70s, she'd been my neighbor since I moved in. "Morning, Megan. Early bird today, aren't you?" I forced a smile. "Just enjoying the sunrise, Mrs. A. How are you?" "Oh, can't complain. Say, did those kids ever find their parents? The ones looking for them the other night?" My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. "What kids?" Mrs. Abernathy frowned, tapping a gnarled finger against her chin. "Let's see, must have been Tuesday night. Some man came around asking if I'd seen his children. A boy and a girl, he said. Thought they might have come to my door. Tuesday night. The same night they came to my door." "What?" "What did this man look like?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice casual. "Tall fellow. Wore a baseball cap pulled down low so I didn't get a good look at his face. But he was concerned, poor thing. Said his kids had wandered off while they were setting up camp in the woods. Did you see his eyes, Mrs. A?" She gave me an odd look. "His eyes? No, dear. Like I said, hat pulled low. Couldn't really see much of his face at all." She paused. "Why do you ask?" "No reason," I lied, "just curious." We chatted a bit more before she went inside to watch her morning programs. I sat on my deck long after my coffee went cold, watching the tree line beyond my yard with newfound wariness. They were escalating, involving others now, creating a backstory. That night, I drove to my sister's house 2 towns over. I didn't tell her about the black-eyed children. She would have thought I was having some kind of breakdown. Instead, I claimed a pipe had burst in my basement and I needed a place to stay while it was fixed. Lisa was happy for the company. She lived alone too, though in an apartment complex with plenty of neighbors and security cameras. I felt safe there, surrounded by other people and the comforting sounds of normal life. Televisions playing, people talking and laughing, cars coming and going in the parking lot. On Sunday night, my last night at Lisa's before I had to return home and back to work, her buzzer rang just after midnight. "Who the heck is that at this hour?" she muttered, shuffling to the intercom. "Hello?" The response came through the tinny speaker, clear enough that I could hear it from the couch where I'd been reading. "Hi. We're looking for Megan Wheeler. We know she's here." Everything inside me went still. Like prey sensing a predator, my body froze before my mind could fully process what I'd heard. Lisa threw me a confused look over her shoulder. "How weird. Some kids looking for you at this hour?" I was already on my feet, grabbing her arm to stop her from pressing the button that would unlock the building's main entrance. "Don't let them in," I whispered urgently. "Please, Lisa, don't let them in." The confusion on her face deepened, edged now with concern. "Megan, what's going on? Do you know these kids?" The buzzer sounded again, more insistent this time. 3 long buzzes that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. "They're not kids," was all I could manage to say, my throat constricting around the words. "Please, just don't answer." Lisa gently freed her arm from my grip. Okay, calm down. I won't let anyone in, but you're kind of freaking me out here." The buzzer fell silent, and we both stared at the intercom as if it might suddenly spring to life on its own. When nothing happened for several minutes, Lisa guided me to the couch and sat beside me, her expression a mixture of worry and bewilderment. "Want to tell me what that was all about?" she asked. So I told her everything, from the first knock on my door to the phone calls to Mrs. Abernathy's encounter with the father. As I spoke, Lisa's expression shifted from skepticism to unease. "Jesus, Megan," she breathed when I finished. I don't even know what to say. Have you considered that maybe I'm having some kind of psychological break?" I finished for her. "Yes, Lisa, I've considered that. Believe me, I would prefer that explanation." She was silent for a moment, chewing her lower lip the way she always did when thinking deeply. "So, these black-eyed children, what do they want? According to the stories, I mean. No one knows for sure. Some theories say they're vampiric entities that need an invitation to enter a home. Others think they're aliens, or demons, or even ghosts of murdered children. But all the stories agree on one thing. Letting them in leads to something terrible. And now they've followed you here," Lisa said softly, "to my apartment." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "I'm so sorry, Lisa. I didn't think they'd be able to find me here." Before she could respond, her phone chimed with a text message. She glanced at it, her face draining of color. "What is it?" I asked, dread pooling in my gut. Wordlessly, she handed me her phone. The text was from an unknown number, and it contained just 5 words. "Please tell Megan to come down." 3 dots? We didn't sleep that night. We huddled together on Lisa's couch, all the lights on, taking turns watching the parking lot through the blinds. But there was no sign of them. No small figures standing unnaturally still beneath the street lamps. No pale faces turned up toward her 3rd-floor window. By morning, exhaustion had dulled our fear enough that Lisa felt comfortable driving me back to my house. We agreed that I would stay with her again that night, after I'd collected more clothes and taken care of a few things at home. "I still think you should talk to someone," Lisa said as she pulled into my driveway. "A professional, I mean. Not because I don't believe you," she added quickly, "but because whatever this is, whether it's supernatural or some elaborate stalking situation, you need support." I promised I would look into therapists that day, though we both knew I was just saying what she wanted to hear. No therapist would believe what was happening to me. They'd see delusions, paranoia, perhaps even the beginning of schizophrenia. "Call me the second you're ready to be picked up," Lisa instructed as I got out of her car. "I don't care what time. And Megan, don't open your door for anyone." After she drove away, I stood in my driveway for a long moment, staring at my house. It looked exactly as I'd left it 2 days ago. Curtains drawn, porch light still on despite the late morning sun. Nothing out of place. Nothing to suggest it had become the focus of something inexplicable and terrifying. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house itself was watching me. That behind those drawn curtains something waited. "This is ridiculous," I muttered, forcing myself to walk up the path to my front door. "You're letting your imagination run wild." I unlocked the door and stepped inside, immediately hitting the panel of light switches by the entrance. Nothing happened. None of the lights came on. The power was out, heart hammering. I backed toward the still open door. In the dimness, my familiar entryway looked alien. The shadows too deep. The silence too complete. And then I noticed something else. A smell, subtle but unmistakable. Like damp earth and something metallic. Something that might have been blood. "Hello?" I called out, instantly regretting it. If someone, or something, was in my house, I'd just announced my presence. Silence answered me. Not even the usual creaks and settling sounds of the old house disturbed the stillness. I should have left then. Should have run straight back down the driveway, called Lisa, waited for her in the safety of broad daylight. But a strange compulsion took hold of me. A need to know, to confirm whether my fears were justified or if I truly was losing my mind. I took out my phone and switched on its flashlight, casting a harsh beam through the entryway and into the living room beyond. Everything looked normal, untouched. The same book I'd been reading still lay open on the coffee table. The same unwashed mug sat beside it. Moving slowly, I checked each room on the first floor. Kitchen, dining room, half-bath, office. Nothing out of place. No sign that anyone had been there during my absence. That left upstairs. As I stood at the bottom of the staircase looking up into the darkness of the second floor, every instinct warned me not to go up there. The smell was stronger here, earth and metal, and now something else. Something like decay. Instead of climbing the stairs, I retreated to the kitchen and found my circuit breaker panel in the utility closet. As I'd suspected, several switches had been flipped to the off position. I hesitated, then pushed them back to on, listening with relief as the refrigerator hummed back to life and lights flickered on throughout the house. With the return of light and familiar sounds, my fear receded slightly. Enough that I found the courage to climb the stairs, checking each room methodically. Master bedroom, bathroom, spare room that served as my home office. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Except for one thing. On my pillow lay a small folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, I picked it up and unfolded it. Inside, written in what looked like crayon, were just 4 words. "We are still waiting." The handwriting was childish, the letters uneven and some backward, as if written by a young child just learning to write. But there was something deliberate about it, too. Something that suggested the childishness was an affectation rather than genuine. I nearly jumped out of my skin when my phone rang. Lisa's number flashed on the screen. "Hey, just checking in," she said when I answered. "Everything okay there?" "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They were in my house, Lisa, while I was gone." "What?" Alarm sharpened her voice. "Are you sure? Did they take anything?" "No, they left me a note. On my pillow." "Jesus, Megan, get out of there, now. I'm already on my way." I hung up and hurried downstairs, the note clutched in my hand. A fresh change of clothes hastily shoved into my overnight bag. As I reached the front door, the power went out again with an audible clunk, plunging the house into sudden darkness. and then I heard it. The soft padding of small feet on the hardwood floors behind me. More than one set. I didn't look back. I yanked open the front door and burst outside into the safety of daylight, not stopping until I reached the end of my driveway. Only then did I turn to look back at the house. 3 small figures stood in my doorway. The 3 black-eyed children from before. The boy in the hoodie, the little girl, and the teenager in the Letterman jacket. They didn't step outside, just stood perfectly framed in the doorway, their black eyes fixed on me. "We're waiting, Megan," the little girl called, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "We'll always be waiting for you to invite us in." I backed away, nearly stumbling off the curb onto the street. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, fear and frustration finally boiling over. "Why me?" The teenage boy smiled then, the first expression I'd seen on any of their faces. It was a cold, empty smile that never reached those bottomless black eyes. "Because you see us," he replied simply. "Most people don't. Not really, but you do." A car horn blared, making me jump. Lisa's sedan screeched to a halt beside me, her worried face visible through the passenger window as she leaned over to push the door open. "Get in," she called urgently. I didn't hesitate, practically diving into the car. As Lisa sped away, I looked back at my house. The doorway was empty, but I could feel them watching still, from behind the curtains, from the darkened windows, their black eyes following our retreat. Neither of us spoke until we were miles away, the familiar streets of my neighborhood replaced by the busy commercial district of downtown. "I saw them," Lisa finally said, her voice small. "Standing in your doorway. Their eyes, God, Megan, their eyes were just like you described." Relief washed over me, not at the confirmation that the black-eyed children were real, but at the knowledge that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't alone in this anymore. "What do we do now?" I asked. Lisa tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "We talked to someone who might know more about this. My roommate from college, Danny. She's into all this paranormal stuff. Studies it, actually, at the university. If anyone will know what these things are and how to make them go away, it's her." It wasn't much, but it was a plan. And for the first time since that initial knock on my door, I felt a flicker of hope. Little did I know that hope would be extinguished all too soon. Danny Rodriguez met us at a busy coffee shop in the center of town. Neutral ground, as she put it. She was nothing like I'd expected from Lisa's description of a paranormal researcher. No crystals, no gothic attire, no intense, haunted eyes. Just a petite woman in jeans and a Northwestern University sweatshirt, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. "So," she said, after introductions had been made and coffee ordered, "Lisa tells me you've encountered the black-eyed children." Her matter-of-fact tone was jarring after days of fear and uncertainty. "You say that like it's a common occurrence," I replied. "More common than you might think." Danny pulled out a tablet and opened a document filled with what looked like interview transcripts. "I've documented 67 distinct encounters in this region alone over the past decade. Most follow the same pattern: unexpected knocking, children asking to be let in, the distinctive black eyes. Have you ever seen them yourself?" Lisa asked. Danny shook her head. "No, I'm what they call an investigator, not a witness. I collect and analyze accounts, look for patterns, try to separate urban legend from actual phenomenon." She turned her attention back to me. "But from what Lisa's told me, your experience hits all the markers of a genuine encounter." "Genuine as opposed to what?" I asked. "People making it up? Or misinterpreting?" Danny clarified. "The human mind is remarkably good at finding patterns, filling in gaps, making the unknown fit into known categories. Some reported Beck encounters are likely just ordinary children seen in poor lighting conditions, or teenagers playing pranks inspired by the urban legend." She paused. "But when multiple witnesses see the same thing, when the entities demonstrate knowledge they shouldn't have, when they create physical evidence, that's harder to dismiss. Like the note they left on Megan's pillow, Lisa said. Danny nodded. Exactly. Or the fact that they followed you to Lisa's apartment. Or that they knew your full name. These details suggest something beyond a simple prank or misidentification. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. So, what are they? And why are they targeting me? As for what they are, Danny sighed. There are theories, but no consensus. Some researchers believe they're interdimensional beings that feed on fear. Others suggest they're manifestations of collective unconscious fears, given form and power by our belief in them. A few even propose they're some kind of psychic vampire, drawing energy from human hosts. And if someone lets them in? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Danny's expression grew solemn. In the accounts where witnesses report allowing them entry, the outcomes are universally negative: illness, accident, disappearance. In one case, a family died in a house fire 3 days after letting black-eyed children into their home. How do I make them go away? I asked. In most accounts, they eventually stop appearing. The pattern seems to be 3 to 7 visits. Then they move on. I can't just wait them out, I protested. They broke into my house. They've escalated each time. What's to stop them from doing something worse? Danny hesitated, exchanging a glance with Lisa. There is one theory about how to end the encounters permanently, but it's controversial. Tell me, I insisted. The black-eyed children seem bound by certain rules. They can't enter without invitation. They can't physically harm anyone directly, and they can't lie when directly questioned. Like vampires, Lisa murmured. Similar constraints, Danny agreed. Which leads to the theory that the way to banish them is to confront them directly, to ask what they want, why they've chosen you, and what would happen if you let them in. You want me to talk to them? I asked incredulously. Not invite them in, Danny clarified quickly. Never that. But to speak with them through a closed door. The theory is that if forced to answer... Story number 4. His form was becoming transparent, fading like a photograph left too long in sunlight. But his voice remained clear. You're asking the wrong questions, Alex. It's not about what's happening to you. It's about what's happening within you. Don't go. I lunged forward, but my hands grasped only empty air. The park around me flickered like a faulty television signal, the edges of reality fraying. Remember the coffee mug, he said, his voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere. That's where it started. And then he was gone completely. The park, the people, the sounds of the city, all dissolved into a swirling darkness that engulfed me. I felt myself falling, tumbling through endless space until... I jolted awake in my own bed, gasping for breath, sheets twisted around my legs like restraints. Weak morning light filtered through my blinds, and for one blissful moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare. Until I saw the coffee mug on my nightstand. My favorite one. White ceramic with blue speckles from my sister. Half full of cold coffee. My phone buzzed beside it. With trembling fingers, I checked the display, 17 missed calls. 5 from Sandra, the rest from colleagues and a few friends. And dozens of text messages, all variations of the same question. Are you okay? What happened yesterday? So, it had been real. The confrontation at the office, my doppelganger, all of it. I scrolled through the messages, trying to piece together what had happened after I'd fled my workplace. According to Melissa, I had returned to the conference room, explaining that some random guy with an uncanny resemblance to me had approached, clearly confused or mentally unwell. Y had suggested someone call security, but by then I was already gone. Life had continued normally, for everyone except me. I threw back the covers and stumbled to the bathroom, confronting my reflection with new wariness. The face that stared back was haggard, eyes bloodshot, stubble darkening my jaw. I looked like a man coming undone. "Are you in there?" I whispered to my reflection, searching my own eyes for any sign of that other personality, that other Alex who claimed to be living my life better than I could. "Are you watching me right now?" My reflection only mimicked my movements, offering no answers. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear my head. I needed a plan, a way to understand what was happening to me. If I wasn't suffering from a mental breakdown, and I wasn't entirely convinced that I wasn't, then what exactly was occurring? The coffee mug. Remember the coffee mug. That's what he had said. I returned to my bedroom and stared at the offending cup. What was special about it? I picked it up, examining it from all angles. Just a simple ceramic mug, half full of cold coffee I didn't remember pouring. Wait. I sniffed the contents. Coffee, yes, but with something else, something vaguely medicinal. I dipped my finger in and tasted it cautiously. Underneath the bitter coffee, there was a strange chemical aftertaste. My mind raced back through the past months. The blackouts had started small, misplaced items, brief moments of confusion, then longer periods of missing time. And always, I would find my coffee mug somewhere unexpected. Was I being drugged? But by whom? I lived alone. No one had access to my apartment except... A memory surfaced. 3 months ago, I'd lost my keys. After tearing apart my apartment looking for them, I'd finally called a locksmith to change the locks. But the next day, my original keys had reappeared in my desk drawer at work. I'd been relieved, if confused, and kept both sets. Had someone made copies before returning them? Had someone been entering my apartment, contaminating my coffee for months? It seemed far-fetched, yet more plausible than a physically manifested split personality. But it didn't explain how someone could look exactly like me, down to the smallest details. Or why they would go to such elaborate lengths to, what, replace me, torture me, make me think I was losing my mind? I needed evidence. I dumped the remaining coffee into a plastic container and sealed it. Then I began methodically searching my apartment for cameras, microphones, anything that suggested surveillance. 2 hours later, I had found nothing. No hidden cameras, no listening devices, but I did find other disturbing signs that someone else had been living in my space. Clothes in my hamper I didn't remember wearing. A receipt for a restaurant I hadn't visited. A business card for a therapist I'd never heard of with an appointment written on the back. Tomorrow's date. My phone buzzed again. Sandra. "Alex, thank God. Are you okay? We've been worried sick." I hesitated, unsure how to respond. What had my doppelganger told them? What would happen if I contradicted his story? "I'm not feeling well," I said finally. "I think I need a few days off." "Of course." Sandra's voice softened with concern. "Take whatever time you need. That was quite a disturbing incident yesterday." "Can you tell me?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "After I left, did the other person say anything about me?" There was a brief silence. "Alex, there is no other person. It was just you, acting strangely, then coming back to your senses. The doctor said—" "Doctor?" I interrupted. "What doctor?" "The psychiatrist that came to the office, don't you remember? After you calmed down, you agreed to speak with him. He said you likely experienced a brief dissociative episode brought on by stress and exhaustion." My blood ran cold. A psychiatrist? I had no memory of this. My doppelganger was covering his tracks, establishing a narrative that would make anything I said seem like the ravings of an unstable mind. "Right," I said weakly. "The doctor. Yes. Sorry, it's all a bit fuzzy." After ending the call, I sat in stunned silence. The situation was worse than I'd imagined. Whatever was happening, my double was methodically undermining my credibility. If I tried to tell anyone the truth now, they'd likely attribute it to my condition. I was trapped in a nightmare with no clear way out. The container of coffee caught my eye. Perhaps there was one avenue still open to me, hard evidence. If I could prove I was being drugged, it might lend credibility to the rest of my story, no matter how implausible it seemed. I dressed quickly and carefully sealed the container in a plastic bag. There was a medical laboratory downtown that offered private testing services. Expensive, but I was desperate for answers. As I prepared to leave, a new text message appeared on my phone. The therapist is excellent. Very understanding about unusual situations. I think you'll like her. The unknown number again. I ignored it, pocketing my phone and grabbing my keys, both sets to be safe. The laboratory was sterile and anonymous, staffed by technicians who asked few questions beyond what tests I wanted run. I claimed I suspected someone had tampered with my drink at a bar and was willing to pay for comprehensive testing. The technician nodded, unfazed, and told me results would be available in 48 hours. 2 days. I had to survive 2 days without knowing whether I was being poisoned or truly losing my grip on reality. I couldn't return to my apartment. It felt contaminated, unsafe. Instead, I checked into a different motel, paid cash again, and tried to think through my options. If someone was drugging me, creating these blackouts and lost time, they must have a purpose. Identity theft seemed the most logical explanation, but my double wasn't just using my credit cards or accessing my accounts. He was living my life, interacting with my friends and colleagues, seemingly trying to replace me entirely. But why? What could anyone possibly gain from such an elaborate deception? Unless, what if he had been telling the truth? What if he really was some manifestation of my subconscious, a physical embodiment of my repressed desires and ambitions? The idea was absurd, impossible, yet so was everything else that had happened. I paced the small motel room, theories spiraling through my mind until exhaustion finally overcame me and I collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed. Sleep brought dreams of corridors again, doors opening onto scenes from my life. But this time I recognized the pattern. These weren't just random dreams. They were memories of times I'd lost, moments my doppelganger had stolen from me. I saw myself giving a presentation I had no recollection of preparing, laughing with colleagues at a bar I'd never visited, kissing a woman I didn't recognize outside a restaurant on North Clark Street. In each scene, I, the other I, moved with a confidence I rarely felt, spoke with an eloquence I usually stumbled to find. And in each scene, if I looked closely at the reflective surfaces, windows, mirrors, the polished bar top, the reflection that looked back had eyes that weren't quite right. Eyes that knew they were being watched. I woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat despite the room's chill. Outside, Chicago was coming alive with morning traffic, the sky brightening to a clear blue that mocked my inner turmoil. My phone showed no new messages, a small mercy. I showered and changed into yesterday's clothes, trying to formulate a plan for the day ahead. I needed to keep moving, to stay ahead of myself. The absurdity of the situation would have been comical if it weren't so terrifying. The laboratory called mid-morning. Results were ready early if I wanted to come in. The technician who had taken my sample greeted me with a professional smile that revealed nothing. He handed me a sealed envelope without comment. I waited until I was sitting in a quiet corner of a nearby cafe before opening it with trembling fingers. The report was filled with technical jargon and chemical compounds I didn't recognize, but one section was highlighted for my attention. The sample contained significant traces of rohypnol, flunitrazepam, and a derivative of ketamine, consistent with substances known to cause amnesia, dissociative states, and highly suggestible mental conditions. I was being drugged, systematically, repeatedly drugged with substances that would make me lose time, forget experiences, become susceptible to suggestion. Relief and horror washed over me in equal measure. I wasn't losing my mind, at least not naturally. Someone was doing this to me. But that still didn't explain how my tormentor could look exactly like me, how they could fool people who had known me for years, unless they didn't need to. Unless the drugs weren't just causing me to forget, but to misperceive. What if there was no doppelganger at all? What if, in my drugged state, I was imagining a separate self, hallucinating an elaborate scenario to explain my blackouts and strange behavior? It would explain why no one else seemed troubled by seeing two versions of me. Because they never had. They had only ever seen one Alex Bennett, sometimes lucid, sometimes confused, his behavior erratic and concerning enough to suggest a psychiatric evaluation. The coffee mug. It always came back to the coffee mug. Someone with access to my apartment was drugging my coffee, causing these episodes. But who and why? I needed to return to my apartment to set up surveillance of my own. If someone was entering without my knowledge, I would catch them. But first, I needed to attend that therapy appointment. If my theory was correct, if there was no actual doppelganger but rather some elaborate gaslighting scheme, then the therapist might have been chosen specifically as part of it. They might know something, or inadvertently reveal something about whoever was behind this. The next morning, I arrived at the address on the business card 10 minutes early. The office was in a converted brownstone on a quiet street. Dr. Eleanor Chen, psychiatrist, displayed on a discreet brass plaque beside the door. The waiting room was empty when I arrived. A receptionist smiled professionally and asked me to fill out standard forms. Medical history, insurance information, current medications. I hesitated over the latter section, wondering if I should mention my recent discovery about being drugged against my knowledge. Before I could decide, a door opened, and a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver-streaked black hair appeared. "Alex? I'm Dr. Chen. Please come in." Her office was warm and inviting, with plants on the windowsills and bookshelves lined with medical texts and literature. No couch, just comfortable armchairs arranged to facilitate conversation without confrontation. "Thank you for seeing me on short notice," I said, taking the offered seat. "Of course." She settled across from me, notepad in hand, but her attention fully on my face. "I understand you've been experiencing some unusual episodes recently." I studied her carefully, looking for any sign that she might be part of whatever was happening to me. But her expression showed only professional concern and interest. "That's one way to put it," I said cautiously. "Before we start, can I ask how this appointment was arranged? I found your card in my apartment, but I don't remember contacting you." If this surprised her, she didn't show it. "Your primary care physician, Dr. Wyatt, referred you. He called yesterday, quite concerned about what happened at your workplace." Another piece of the puzzle. Dr. Wyatt was indeed my doctor, though I hadn't seen him in months. Had my doppelganger visited him too, or had someone at work contacted him after the incident? "Dr. Chen," I began slowly, "what would you say if I told you I believe someone has been systematically drugging me, causing blackouts and memory loss, possibly to steal my identity or make me think I'm losing my mind?" To her credit, she didn't immediately dismiss the idea. "I would say that's a very specific fear, and I'm curious what evidence has led you to this conclusion." I told her everything: the coffee mug, the lost time, the items moved around my apartment, the bizarre encounter at my office, and finally, the laboratory results confirming foreign substances in my coffee. Throughout my story, she listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful rather than skeptical. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "Alex," she said finally, "I want to be very clear that I'm taking what you're saying seriously. The lab results particularly concern me. However, I need to point out that some of the substances found in your coffee can cause hallucinations and paranoia along with memory loss." "So, you think I'm imagining things?" I couldn't keep the disappointment from my voice. "No. I think something very real and very troubling is happening to you. But we need to consider all possibilities. including that some of what you've experienced may be effects of the drugs themselves rather than separate events. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. Let me ask you this. Before these episodes began, was there anyone in your life who might have reason to want to disturb your sense of reality? Former relationships, workplace rivalries, even family conflicts? I thought hard, trying to imagine who could possibly have motivation for such an elaborate scheme of torment. No one, I said finally. My life is pretty ordinary. Boring even. Dr. Chen made a note. And these incidents began approximately 3 months ago. Was there anything significant happening in your life at that time? The answer came to me suddenly. I was up for a promotion, a significant one. But I didn't get it. Sandra said I wasn't showing enough initiative, that I seemed content to stay where I was. And how did that make you feel? Disappointed, I guess, but not devastated. It confirmed what I already knew about myself, that I'm cautious, maybe too comfortable with routine. I paused, remembering my doppelganger's words in the park, that I was just fine, not miserable, not thrilled, just existing. Something shifted in Dr. Chen's expression. Subtle, but unmistakable. Recognition. Alex, she said carefully, I'd like to try something, if you're willing. A simple relaxation technique that might help us understand what's happening. Warning bells sounded in my mind. What kind of technique? Nothing invasive, just a guided meditation to help you access memories that might be compartmentalized. I hesitated. You think I have some kind of dissociative disorder? That I'm doing this to myself? I think, she said gently, that the mind creates fascinating mechanisms to protect itself when under stress. Sometimes the very qualities we suppress or criticize in ourselves will find other ways to express themselves. The implication hung between us. My doppelganger wasn't a physical entity or a hallucination, but a part of my own consciousness that had broken free. What about the drugs in my coffee? I challenged. A question worth investigating, she acknowledged. But let's start with what we can explore right here, right now. Would you be willing to close your eyes and follow my voice for a few minutes? Against my better judgment, curiosity won out. I nodded and closed my eyes. Take deep breaths, Dr. Chen instructed, her voice taking on a rhythmic quality. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Feel the tension leaving your body with each exhale. I followed her instructions, my initial wariness gradually giving way to a state of calm unlike anything I'd experienced in recent memory. Now, she continued, I want you to think back to that coffee mug, the white ceramic with blue speckles, your favorite mug. Remember the first time you noticed it had moved? Picture that moment clearly. In my mind's eye, I saw myself coming into the kitchen that morning, confused to find the mug on the nightstand instead of in the dishwasher where I'd left it. Now, Dr. Chen's voice seemed to come from far away. I want you to step back in your memory. Before you found the mug moved, go back to the previous night. What do you remember? I frowned, concentrating. I was working late. A project for the Thompson account. Good. What time did you finish working? Around midnight, I think. And then, what did you do? I put my coffee mug in the dishwasher and went to bed. Are you sure? The question hung in the air. Was I sure? I tried to visualize the sequence of events more clearly. Working late. The apartment quiet except for the tapping of my keyboard. The coffee growing cold beside me. Deciding I needed sleep. Standing up, stretching, taking the mug to the kitchen, and a flash of something else. A thought that didn't feel like mine. This isn't living. This is just existing. Alex? Dr. Chen's voice pulled me back. What did you see? I'm not sure. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. I think I might have been angry, frustrated with my life, with the routine. And what did you do with that frustration? Another flash, standing in my kitchen, staring at my reflection in the window, hating what I saw. The endless, predictable loop of my days. The safety I'd chosen over passion. The security I'd prioritized over joy. And then, a decision, a radical one. My eyes flew open. Dr. Chen was watching me carefully. "I think," I said slowly, the realization dawning with horrifying clarity, I might have drugged myself. The words hung in the air between us, simultaneously absurd and the only explanation that made sense of everything. The moved objects, the coffee, the blackouts that began after my professional disappointment. "Why would I do that?" I whispered, more to myself than to her. Dr. Chen's expression was compassionate but direct. Sometimes, when we feel trapped by who we've become, the mind seeks escape routes. Most people change jobs, and relationships move cities. But occasionally, when these external changes feel impossible, the pressure turns inward. So what? Created another personality and started drugging myself to let it take control? The idea was preposterous. And yet, "I'm not prepared to diagnose anything in our first session," Dr. Chen said carefully. "But the combination of dissociative drugs, significant life stressors, and your own admission of feeling trapped in your routine creates a compelling hypothesis." I remembered the laboratory report. Rohypnol, ketamine, drugs that would cause exactly the symptoms I'd been experiencing. Drugs I could have obtained online with enough determination. "But the confrontation at my office," I protested. "People saw both of us, both versions of me, at the same time." "Did they?" Dr. Chen countered gently. "Or did they see one person, you, behaving erratically, making contradictory statements, appearing confused and then lucid? The human brain is remarkably adept at creating narratives to explain the inexplicable." My certainty wavered. Had I hallucinated the entire confrontation? Imagined my doppelganger as a separate physical entity when he was merely another state of my own consciousness? "I don't know what's real anymore," I admitted, the fight draining out of me. "That's a frightening place to be," Dr. Chen acknowledged. "But it's also the beginning of truth. The first step toward healing is recognizing that something is wrong." I looked up at her, suddenly desperate for guidance. "What do I do now?" "First, you stop drugging yourself," she said firmly. "No more coffee from home until we're certain it's safe. Second, you allow yourself to explore this other aspect of your personality, not through chemical means, but through therapeutic ones. And if I'm not doing this to myself, if someone else is drugging me, manipulating me, then we'll find evidence of that too," she promised. "But Alex, either way, the core issue remains the same. You're deeply unhappy with the life you've created for yourself. Whether this unhappiness has manifested as self-sabotage or has made you vulnerable to external manipulation, addressing it is essential to your recovery." As I left Dr. Chen's office an hour later, the Chicago afternoon was bright and crisp. The city continued its relentless rhythm around me, people hurrying to meetings, tourists exploring landmarks, life proceeding normally despite my inner turmoil. For the first time in months, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Whether my doppelganger was a drug-induced hallucination, a split personality, or something else entirely, he represented a truth I could no longer ignore. I had been sleepwalking through my own existence. I took out my phone and typed a message to the unknown number. To myself, perhaps. I understand now, but there has to be a better way than this. The reply came almost instantly. "There is. Let me show you." Standing on that busy Chicago street corner, caught between who I had been and who I might become, I made a decision. I would not surrender my life entirely, but neither would I return to mere existence. I typed one final message, not through drugs or deception. Together, consciously, or not at all. For a long moment there was no response. Then just 3 words appeared on the screen. "I'm already here." I I looked up from my phone, half expecting to see my doppelganger standing before me. Instead, I caught my reflection in a store window, standing straighter than usual, a slight smile playing at the corners of my lips. And for a brief moment, my eyes in the reflection held a gleam of something I hadn't seen in years. Hope. Hey there, night owls. That was how I became trapped in my own mind. Was Alex suffering from a split personality? Was he being gaslighted? Or was something more supernatural at play? I'd love to hear your theories in the comments below. If this story kept you up tonight, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the darkest corners of human experience. Until next time, sweet dreams.